Salutations and welcome, friends, to another episode of Amalfi Sports. And I am again your host, Matthew DeSantis. And today we are previewing a big race out at Del Mar on Sunday, August 1st. And that would be the Clement Hirsch Stakes, which is a Grade 1 win and you're in race for the Breeders' Cup in November at the very same Del Mar track that this will be run at. Now, before we get started, I wanted to take a second and say thank you again to all of our new viewers and subscribers. Much appreciated. We have a lot of great content at Amalfi Media, and it's not just about sports and horse racing. You really should go to our website, check out all we have to offer at amalfimedia.com. We're also adding some new features to Amalfi Sports. We're going to start airing interviews with prominent figures across the world of sports, but particularly in horse racing, from handicappers to announcers to trainers to jockeys and more. The best way to get this content is to subscribe to Amalfi Media on YouTube, and very shortly, there's going to be a podcast for you to subscribe to as well, so you can check out the Amalfi Sports podcast feed on the podcast platform of your choice. Finally, to stay up to date with all of the daily activity in horse racing, and man alive, is there a lot, make sure to follow me on Twitter at the handle @FailedToMenace. Again, that's the Twitter handle @FailedToMenace. And one last note, just as a reminder, we will be producing these racing previews every week from now through the Breeders' Cup. And so there's a lot of great content you don't want to miss. We're going to be ping-ponging between Saratoga and Del Mar for most of the summer and early fall, but we're also going to be bringing in tracks from Colonial Downs in Virginia, Charlestown Downs in West Virginia, maybe even Arlington Park as it's starting to close. Do a preview from there. Santa Anita certainly is going to be, when it starts back up in September, will be another track we visit. So, as always, make sure to like and comment with your thoughts on how you think the race will break down this weekend, and share with your fellow horse racing fanatics on social media to spread the word about where you can get the most fun analysis out there right now. So, let's dive into the Clement Hirsch Stakes. Of course, there are 10 races on the card Sunday at Del Mar, and if you want to get my picks to all of those races, check out the Sunday Picks blog at amalfimedia.com. So let's turn our attention, though, to the 9th of those 10 races, which is the Clement Hirsch Grade 1 Win and You're In race for 3-year-olds. And this is a race that is 1 mile and a 16th, and it's for fillies and mares. It's on the dirt, and post time is 9 o'clock Eastern, 6 o'clock Pacific. So make sure to check that out. Should be a really competitive race. So let's take a look at the field for the Clement Hirsch Stakes. As I mentioned, 1 mile and a 16th on dirt for 3-year-olds and up for fillies and mares. And this is a 7-horse field. So not a huge field, but an interesting one, very tiered, I would say. And so we'll start with one of the stronger horses, maybe not at the very top, but certainly one of the more competitive horses, I think, in this race, Warren's Showtime, trained by Craig Lewis and jockeyed by Juan Hernandez. Then the number 2 horse, Clock Strikes 12, trained by Jonathan Wong and jockeyed by Kyle Frey. And then number 3, the Bob Baffert horse, As Time Goes By, and that very famous connection of Bob Baffert and Mike Smith. And then Paige Ann, trained by Simon Callahan and jockeyed by Flavian Pratt, who you've heard me talk a lot about on some of the other previews. Then number 5, Cover Version, trained by Reed Saldana and jockeyed by Abel Cadillo. And then you have the 6 and 7, where a lot of favorites, a lot of speed out there on the far end of the post. Venetian Harbor, trained by Richard Baltas and jockeyed by Mario Gutierrez. And then finally, the morning line favorite going off at 7-5, She Dares the Devil, trained by Brad Cox and jockeyed by Florent Giroux. So that is the field for the Clement Hirsch Stakes. And let's talk a little bit about this field and how things might be playing out. I think generously, I see this as a 4-horse race. With no disrespect to Clock Strikes 12, Paige Ann, and Cover Version, there's nothing that makes me think those three horses are going to be able to compete with the upper crust in this race. And quite frankly, there's nothing to make me think they're going to get on the board. So I'm not going to really talk much about those three. I'll mention Paige Ann a little bit towards the end, and maybe I could talk about her a little bit now. If you're looking out of any of those three, maybe you look at Paige Ann going off at 15-1, trained by a very capable trainer, Simon Callahan, jockeyed by an incredibly hot jockey out at Del Mar this season, Flavian Pratt. So you might say, well, maybe there's something there. Maybe Paige Ann comes in fourth, maybe third, maybe. I just, if you're trying to add value to some of your exotic picks as a trifecta or a superfecta, I could understand putting Paige Ann in there just to drive up the value. But from a practical standpoint, I just don't see how Paige Ann is going to actually compete with the top horses in this field. So let's actually take a turn and look at those top horses. And we'll start with the horse that I think is maybe on the outside looking in of that top tier, which is Warren's Showtime, coming off at the number 1 hole, going off at 8-1. What makes Warren's Showtime so interesting is that this is a turf horse who is returning to dirt. Last 7 or 8 races have all been on turf. So it's interesting to see the decision to move Warren Showtime back onto the dirt, where she's only run on the dirt twice, and so has not necessarily responded that great to the dirt. Granted, a lot of it was earlier in her career. She's very good on turf. She's posted some impressive buyer speed numbers, so there is something to like there. The concern, though, with her is that on turf, she's only really been going a mile. So there are some questions about distance and stamina, and whether or not making a transition to a new surface, as well as going a little bit longer than she's accustomed to, makes any sense. I will say that she has been on a pretty consistent schedule of racing once a month, every month for the last 3 months, but now she does have 6 weeks rest this time around. So she's getting a little bit more time to recuperate, maybe a little bit more time to take on a longer distance. So there is something there potentially if you're looking at it as an outside trifecta or superfecta. Again, at 8-1, provides you a little bit of value. Do I think Warren Showtime is going to compete for victory in this race? I don't. But I think she is clearly the next best horse out of the top 3. So let's actually talk about one of those top 3 and go into this triumvirate of horses. And it's going to be the Bob Baffert horse as time goes by, going off at 8-5. This is a very impressive horse, has won 4 of the last 5. Only loss has been to Swiss Skydiver, who's a great horse. Distance is interesting. And this is where I want to talk a little bit about some of the challenges that perhaps as time goes by may have in this race. Mile and a 16th, I think, is kind of the upper limit on her distance. Maybe she can stretch out to a mile and an eighth, but I think her calling is really as a miler. And when she is asked to go a mile and a 16th to a mile and an eighth, she really has to be urged. She really has to be pushed. She doesn't pull away. If anything, other horses start catching up with her. She kind of builds up a little bit of a gap. She builds up some distance between herself and the other horses in the field. Then as they come down the stretch, that last furlong and that last 16th or 8th of a mile, she's got enough of a cushion that she's able to win, but she doesn't win going away at that distance. And the other thing to look at is her times. Her best time at a mile and a 16th is 1:43.3. She shares the devil and Venetian Harbor haven't run a 1:43.3 mile and a 16th in like 2 years. I mean, they're flying. They're going 1:41, 1:42. Now, granted, every race is its own race. Sometimes the pace is going to be slow. Sometimes it's going to be fast. Sometimes horses don't always have control over that, just because of the way that maybe a speed goes out early, or maybe a lack of speed goes out early, slows it down for everyone. But I think that's something to keep in mind, that She Shares the Devil and Venetian Harbor seem to have another gear when going a mile and a 16th. That as time goes by, is still a younger horse. I just don't know. There's a little bit more of an unknown factor there. And so I'm not quite as high on as time goes by. And listen, this has, I know Bob Baffert has become a bit of a villain in horse racing, or a very divisive figure for some in horse racing. Bob Baffert and Mike Smith, if they have the best horse, I'm going to say they have the best horse. I just don't know if they have the best horse in this particular race. And there's some questions there, I think, in terms of stamina and speed that makes me question just how effective they're going to be in this higher level of competition. So let's talk about one of those other horses, Venetian Harbor, going off at 2-1. And there's a lot to like about this horse. The only thing that's not to like is distance. Typically runs under a mile, but has done a mile and a 16th before. As I mentioned, has run very fast at a mile and a 16th. Has gone 141 and change. So can definitely go the distance, but typically tries to stay at that 6 to 7 furlong distance. Now, what I will say is if you look at the workout numbers, she has been working out at 7 furlongs, which to me tells me that her trainer clearly is focused on trying to build up the horse's stamina for this particular race. Richard Baltas, is a successful trainer, knows what he's doing. And again, you don't work out horses at 7 furlongs very often. And so to see a 7 furlong workout was a little eye-opening, and just speaks to getting this horse accustomed to going that distance, going a little bit longer, pushing that speed a little bit longer. But she, Venetian Harbor and the favorite, She Shares the Devil, they're going to be the early speed in this race. They're going to set the pace. And so the question is will, as time goes by, be able to keep up with that? Because She Shares the Devil and Venetian Harbor, guess what? They can keep up with that pace because they've done it before at grade 1 and grade 2 stakes races. So again, there's a lot to like there. I will say another thing about Venetian Harbor is she just debuted back in June after a 6-month layoff. It was her first race of the calendar year. She hadn't raced since December. Looked very sharp, posted a nice Beyer speed number of a 97. Typically, I would expect there to be an improvement that second time out. You're knocking a little bit of rust off that first race after a 6-month layoff. Could she go even higher? Could she go a little faster? Could she go longer? Something to consider, because now she's had, 7 weeks, it'll be basically 7-8 weeks for her to recover from that first race. So again, a lot to like there with Venetian Harbor. I just really like that horse. Now let's go to the crown jewel of the race, the favorite, She Shares the Devil, going off at 7 to 5. This is a horse that has a lot to like. It was also probably going to hit the lead early. But what I would say is I think She Shares the Devil is probably going to back off and let Venetian Harbor set that time, kind of stay on the outside of Venetian Harbor potentially, and ride that second position all the way around. I think that's what's probably going to happen. If you took a look at some of She Shares the Devil's previous races against fast competition, particularly when she went up against Latruska, she typically lets Latruska go ahead, and then she is more of a stalker and kind of stays in that second position behind her. But listen, she is a very impressive horse. She lost to Latruska last time out. But listen, the Latruska is maybe the best horse in the country. There's not a lot of, not a lot of disrespect to lose to Latruska. Nearly everybody does. Interestingly, though, she actually beat Latruska in 2021 earlier this year at the Grade 2 Azeri. So she's just very classy. I mean, she's got 2 Grade 1 victories. She's got a bunch of Grade 2 victories. She's going up against this level of competition. Also, the combination of Brad Cox and Florent Gerlou, there's a lot to like there. They've both done well this year on different tracks with different horses across a multitude of distances. And so those two give you a lot of confidence that a horse like She Shares the Devil's in good hands. Also, distance is not going to be an issue. That's important. Distance is an issue for a lot of these horses. She Shares the Devil goes mile and an eighth, mile and a 16th all the time. So that's not going to be an issue for her. So again, fewer question marks. Now, I think those last 3, though, very, very close. Very, very close. All 3 of those horses have posted between 96 and 99 Beyer speed numbers this year, and they've been remarkably consistent. So it is it's tough to really disaggregate and to take these three apart from each other. But I think at the end of the day, you have to kind of go with class, or at least that's the way I'm leaning. And so the way that I see the Clement Hirsch stakes playing out is I have 7, 6, 3, and 1. And that is going to be She Shares the Devil to win, Venetian Harbor to place, As Time Goes By to show, and Warren's Showtime to come in fourth. Now, what I will say is, I think if you want to go with Paige Ann, who I mentioned at the top, as a long shot in place of Warren Showtime, that makes sense. I could see that happening. I could see Flavien Prat giving this horse a pretty good ride, getting into that fourth position. You never know how a horse like Warren's Showtime, that's been almost exclusively on turf, is going to handle the transition to dirt. So maybe you sit there and go, well, maybe there's a long shot that can pop in at that fourth place. I just don't see how those top three finish outside of the top three. Now, some people might differ. I know, I was talking to some other people earlier today. They really like As Time Goes By to win. I understand that. But again, I just look at the history of going a mile and a 16th, and She Shares the Devil and Venetian Harbor have an extra gear that I don't know if Mike Smith and As Time Goes By will be able to have on Sunday. So that's the way I see it. She Shares the Devil, Venetian Harbor, As Time Goes By, and Warren's Showtime. Well, listen, folks, that's it for today. But I hope you enjoyed this little preview of the Clement Hirsch Stakes. And remember to go check out my blog for all of my picks for the Sunday card at Del Mar. And you can get that by going to the Amalfi Media website at amalfimedia.com. Finally, just a reminder to subscribe to Amalfi Media on YouTube and follow me on Twitter at the handle at Failed to Menace to get all of the great horse racing content you need to get you through to this year's Breeders' Cup and beyond. Until next time, I'm Matthew DeSantis, wishing you a great day at the races and reminding you that it's now post time.